We welcome our distinguished witnesses today. Do you and each of you swear that the testimony that you are about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And I'll now begin by introducing today's witnesses. The first witness is Dr. Anthony Levatino. Dr. Levatino is a board-certified obstetrician gynecologist. Over the course of his career, Dr. Levatino has practiced obstetrics and gynecology in both private and university settings, including as an associate professor of OB/GYN at the Albany Medical College. And Dr. Levatino, we'll begin with you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to get right to it. Second trimester D&E abortions performed between roughly 14 and 24 weeks of gestation. Your patient today is 17 years old. She's 22 weeks pregnant. Her baby is the length of your hand plus a couple of inches. And she's been feeling her baby kick for the last several weeks, but she's asleep on an operating room table. You walk into that operating room scrubbed and gowned, and after removing laminaria, you introduce a suction catheter into the uterus. This is a 14 French suction catheter. If she were 12 weeks pregnant or less, basically the width of your hand or smaller, you could basically do the entire procedure with this. But babies this big don't fit through catheters this size. After suctioning the amniotic fluid out from around the baby, you introduce an instrument called a Sofer clamp. It's about 13 inches long. It's made of stainless steel. The business end of this clamp is about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch wide. There are rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. A D&E procedure is a blind abortion, so picture yourself introducing this and grabbing anything you can blindly and pull, and I do mean hard, and out pops a leg about that big, which you put down on the table next to you. Reach in again, and pull out an arm about the same length, which you put down on the table next to you. And use this instrument again and again to tear out the spine, the intestines, the heart and lungs. Head on the baby that size is about the size of a large plum. Can't see it, but you pretty good idea you've got it if you've got your instrument around something and your fingers are spread about as far as they go. You know you did it right if you crush down on the instrument and white material runs out of the cervix. That was the baby's brains. Then you could pull out skull pieces. And you have a day like I had a lot of times. Sometimes a little face comes back and stares back at you. Congratulations, you just successfully performed a second trimester D&E abortion. You just affirmed her right to choose.
One more question, Dr. Levatino. Why did you end your practice of doing abortions?
I did over 1,200 abortions over a 4-year period in private practice, not counting the ones that I did during my training. I met my wife during my first year of training at Albany Medical Center. We got married about a year later and found that we had an infertility problem. After years of failed infertility treatment and several years trying to adopt a child, we were blessed with adopting a little girl that we named Heather in August of 1978. As sometimes happens in those situations, my wife got pregnant the very next month, and we had 2 children 10 months apart. 2 months short of my daughter Heather's 6th birthday, she was killed in an auto accident and literally died in her arms in the back of an ambulance. Anyone who has children might think they have some idea of what that feels like, but unless you've been through it yourself, you have no idea whatsoever. I know people find it hard to believe, but what do you do after disaster? You bury your child and then you go back to your life. And I don't remember exactly how long it was after my daughter died that I showed up at Albany Medical Center OR number 9 to perform my first second trimester D&E abortion. I wasn't thinking of it as anything special. This was routine to me. But I reached in, literally pulled out an arm or leg and got sick. You know, earlier on I described stacking up body parts on the side of the table. It's not to, gross people out, to use a simple term. When you do an abortion, you need to keep inventory. You have to make sure you get 2 arms and 2 legs and all the pieces. If you don't, your patient's going to come back infected, bleeding, or dead. So I soldiered on and finished that abortion. And I know it sounds, as I said, hard for people to believe, but I'm telling you straight up my experience. You know, after over 1,200 abortions, first and second trimester up to 24 weeks and all the rest of it, and being very dedicated to it, for the first time in my life I really looked. I really looked at that pile of body parts on the side of the table. And I didn't see her wonderful right to choose, and I didn't see all the money I just made. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter. And I stopped doing late-term abortions after that, and several months later stopped doing all abortions.
Still a question. Thank you.
So how late in the third trimester would you be able to do that?
You know, it's very unfortunate that our physicians, witnesses, were not able to attend today to speak specifically.
No, I'm
to
talking
that.
about your bill. How late in the third trimester could a physician perform an abortion if he indicated it would impair the mental health of the woman?
Or physical health.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm talking about the mental health.
So, I mean, through the third trimester. The third trimester goes all the way up to 40 weeks.
Okay, but to the end of the third trimester.
Yep, I don't think we have a limit in the bill.
So, where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth, she has physical signs that she is about to give a birth, would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified? She's dilating.
Mr. Chairman, that would be a decision that the doctor, the physician, and the woman would
I understand
make at
that. I'm asking
point.
if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
No exception. There was a very contentious committee hearing yesterday when Fairfax County Delegate Kathy Tran made her case for lifting restrictions on third trimester abortions as well as other restrictions now in place. And she was pressed by a Republican delegate about whether her bill would permit an abortion even as a woman is essentially dilating, ready to give birth. And she answered that it would permit an abortion at that stage of labor. Do you support her measure and explain her answer?
Yeah, and I wasn't there, Julie, and I certainly can't speak for Delegate Tran, but I would tell you, first thing I would say, this is why decisions such as this should be made by providers, physicians, and the mothers and fathers that are involved. There are, when we talk about third trimester abortions, these are done with the consent of obviously the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion. But again, we want the government not to be involved in these types of decisions. We want the decision to be made by the mothers and their providers. And this is why, Julie, that legislators, most of whom are men, by the way, shouldn't be telling a woman what she should and shouldn't be doing with her body.
And do you think multiple physicians should have to weigh in as is currently required? She's trying to lift that requirement.
Well, I think it's always good to get a second opinion and for at least two providers to be involved in that decision, because these decisions shouldn't be taken lightly. And so, I would certainly support more than one provider.
All right, let's go back to the phones now for the governor. We're going to talk now with Mike, who's calling.
I'm the Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Kentucky, and I'm here to testify against Senate Bill 9. This law is patently unconstitutional. The second it is signed, the ACLU of Kentucky will file a lawsuit. I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 9. My name is Nicole Stipp. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a tax-paying constituent. I create jobs, and I issue a lot of 1099s. And I have had an abortion. It didn't have a heartbeat. It didn't have a face. It didn't have feelings. It was a clump of cells and tissue. I can also promise you that had I been forced to see this pregnancy through, I would have done what women have done for all the decades people like you have been trying to stop abortions. I would have gone to any length, medically overseen or not, to end my pregnancy. I am just like the other 1 in 4 women that have had abortions. We do it because we cannot provide a life for children while we work for financial stability. We do it because we don't want to bear children and haven't yet had our IUDs or surgeries to prevent it. We do it because we're 18, have been sexually assaulted, and don't want to have a baby.
Thank you for your comments, and we will now yield to the sponsor of the bill.
Good morning, committee.
I'm Senator Castlin, the sponsor of Senate Bill 9, the fetal heartbeat bill. And the first speaker is Abby Johnson. And Abby, if you can introduce yourself for the record.
Sure. My name is Abby Johnson. I worked at Planned Parenthood for 8 years. I was an abortion clinic director. And I listened to the testimony from the opposition of this bill, and I want to sort of go through some of that interesting testimony that we heard and many non-factual points that were made in that testimony. One thing that I kept hearing was that, there's no exceptions in this bill for any sort of rape or incest. Let me be clear. Even if they were, the ACLU wouldn't support it. Even if there were, Planned Parenthood wouldn't support this bill. So the fact that they're even bringing that up is really intellectually dishonest. Abortion can never, on its face, be safe, because in order for an abortion to be deemed successful, an individual and unique human being with a beating heart must die. That can never be safe for that individual human life. I want to talk specifically about what a first trimester abortion is and what it looks like from a person who ran a Planned Parenthood abortion facility and was there for 8 years. First trimester abortions are by and large the most common abortion procedure we see in the United States. A transvaginal ultrasound is standard procedure inside of every National Abortion Federation clinic, which includes every Planned Parenthood clinic. That transvaginal ultrasound is done for primarily one reason: to determine how far along the woman is in her pregnancy so that we knew how much to charge her for the abortion. After the ultrasound is performed, the ultrasound machine is rolled away. The doctor comes in, who, by the way, has no conversation with the woman before the abortion. The fact that many people say abortion should be a decision made between a woman and her doctor is laughable. There is never a time where the abortion doctor goes in, sits down with the woman, and goes over risk, alternatives, and benefits to abortion. It does not happen. The doctor starts performing the abortion. He's going to insert into the woman's uterus, into the cervix, metal dilation rods, graduated metal dilation rods. He's going to dilate the cervix enough so that he can insert something called a suction cannula. That cannula looks like a straw. It is graduated. It gets bigger depending on how big the baby is in the womb, so that the head will be able to fit through that suction cannula. He's going to insert that suction probe inside of the woman's uterus. Ultrasound guidance is not used. That is not the standard protocol inside of National Abortion Federation or Planned Parenthood clinics. He's going to take that probe and he's going to blindly poke around inside the woman's uterus until he thinks he has enough blood and tissue in a glass jar. That glass jar is going to go into a lab called the POC lab. POC in the medical community stands for products of conception. The products of conception is, of course, the baby. But you can't say baby inside of the abortion clinic. So we said POC or POC, or if the staff was feeling funny, they would say that it stood for parts of children. After all the parts were accounted for, the POC lab technician would dump everything out into a glass baking dish that sat on top of an X-ray light box, and she would reassemble the parts of the baby. Please understand me, I'm talking about first trimester abortion. Yes, there are parts. Yes, they must be reassembled. The baby is fully formed. Every internal organ is formed by 12 weeks gestation. So yes, there are parts, even earlier than 12 weeks. Once all of the parts are reassembled, that POC tech will take everything, dump it into a red biohazard Ziploc sort of bag, and those bags will go into a freezer in the POC lab that the staff jokingly called the nursery. And once a week, a company, a biohazard medical waste company like Stericycle, will come into the facility and they will pick up all the red bags of babies where they are taken to their facility to be incinerated. That's if the abortion facility decides they don't want to just put them in their industrial size garbage disposal and grind them up and put them into the water waste treatment facilities. That is first trimester abortion. We have already heard the testimonies from the opposition calling women who are pregnant persons, because now we live in a time where people say it is not just women who get pregnant. Now apparently men can get pregnant. And that shows you just how detached from science the pro-choice side is on this issue. Fact, only women get pregnant. You gotta have lady parts to have a baby. That's science. Science also tells us that from the moment of conception, unique and individual and unrepeatable DNA is formed. That DNA is human. Never in the history of the world has a woman ever delivered a cat or a dog or any other species other than human. That's science. Our history tells us time and time again that it is unjust to take the life of an innocent human being. It was unjust to dehumanize an entire segment of people when we were working to abolish slavery. It was unjust to dehumanize an entire group of Jewish people in the Holocaust. But those two examples that I just gave you only exist because our society was willing to turn a blind eye, look a human person in the face, and say, that is not a human being. That is not scientific. Now we are living in such depravity that there are people, like the people that oppose this bill, that are willing to say, I know it's a human being, I know it has a heartbeat, I know there is life there, and I know it is innocent, and I'm willing to kill it. We have sunk to a new low in our society. And it is time for us to rectify what we have done. So if you are a person here who has had an abortion, I encourage you to seek healing, because abortion is not normal. Taking the life of an innocent human being that is your own flesh and blood and your own DNA, it's not normal. And there are healing resources available. And to the people in here who work in the abortion industry, I encourage you to seek healing from a ministry called And Then There Were None. We can get you out of the industry, and we can get you into a line of work that you can actually be proud of. And to the ACLU, I can say affirmatively, we look forward to your lawsuit.
This is a picture of a 19-week-old baby. This is a human child. This is not a ball of goo. This is not a cluster of cells. In January, 44 Democrats in the United States Senate voted not to protect the rights of babies older than this unborn child. Only 3 Democrats, Joe Manchin, Joe Donnelly, and Bob Casey, voted to protect children at 20 weeks. Only 2 Republicans voted against such protection, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. Take a good look at that baby. That is a human being with 0 rights, according to the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And human life doesn't begin at 20 weeks. This is a picture of a baby at 12 weeks, barely 3 months. You can see this baby with his hands near his chest. This is not a cluster of cells. This is not a ball of goo. His genitalia have already been formed. His liver and spleen produce red blood cells. This is an unborn human being. Not a single federally elected Democrat would vote for an abortion ban that would protect this baby's life. And life doesn't begin at 14 weeks. This is a picture of an unborn human being at 8 weeks. You can identify the head of this unborn human. You can see where the small buds are forming for arms and legs. But guess what? Life doesn't begin at 8 weeks either. It begins at fertilization, when a new human life is formed, a new human being with its own DNA. This human being is not its mother. It is not its father. It is not a polyp. If we found a human embryo on another planet, the headlines would rightly scream, "Human life found on Mars." Human life is a continuous process of growth from the moment of fertilization onward. Abortion is the killing of this human life. The later the abortion takes place, the more brutal the procedure. But no matter the brutality of the procedure, it is obvious that abortion is not some mere optional surgery to be performed for convenience. And it's even more obvious that those who want to protect the lives of the unborn aren't trying to control women's bodies. Those who cherish abortion are trying to control and dismember the bodies of the unborn. Think about that next time you see a radical feminist in a Handmaid's Tale outfit suggesting that you'd better respect her right to carve apart an unborn baby in the womb, or you're some sort of fascist. No more euphemism.
Now a story we guarantee most of you have never heard before. The subject is highly charged and controversial. Behind the scenes of some promising medical research, big money is being made from the sale of fetal body parts. Chief Correspondent Chris Wallace has been investigating this story. Chris?
Connie, our hidden camera investigation has found evidence that some businessmen are trafficking in fetuses. One has even put out a price list. And there are claims that some are selling fetuses that women have not even given for research. Here's what can happen when something that is supposed to be used to spur medical breakthroughs is used instead to make money. It's a moment too painful to imagine. After getting radiation treatments for cancer, Cindy Smith, a mother of 5, learned she was pregnant with twins.
They basically told me that my children were dying inside me, that I was the only thing keeping them living.
Cindy decided to end her pregnancy. She says her only comfort came from signing this consent form, giving the fetuses to medical researchers looking into cures for terrible diseases.
What I wanted to do was make something positive out of a horrible situation.
What she didn't know is that this man would be making money off her twins.
If you have a guy that's desperate for, let's say, a heart, then he'll pay you whatever you ask.
His name is Dr. Miles Jones, and he says he can make big bucks selling human fetuses to researchers.
Let's say someone needs feet. Feet are real common. They're not hard to get.
A 2020 hidden camera investigation has found a thriving industry in which aborted fetuses women donate to help medical research are being marketed for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. We showed what we found undercover to Arthur Kaplan, director of the University of Pennsylvania Center for Bioethics.
That's trading in body parts. There's no doubt about it.
Turning human fetuses into a commodity?
Into a product.
There's a demand for fetal tissue because doctors believe it may be the key to medical breakthroughs. Cures for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, diabetes, and other illnesses. Some researchers use fetal cells. Others need whole organs or limbs. But no one on either side of the abortion debate wants fetal research to become an incentive for abortions. So laws have been passed to draw a clear line. A woman must decide to have an abortion before she's approached to donate the fetus. Abortions can't be altered to get better specimens. And above all, tissue can't be sold for profit. Despite all that, some businessmen have slipped in and turned human fetuses into dollars.
This is purely for profit. Everything was about money.
Dean Alberti worked for 2 companies that acted as middlemen, getting fetuses from abortion clinics and shipping tissue to researchers.
When I got the fetus, I'd already have a checklist tell me what specific organs they were looking for.
The law allows tissue companies to recover their costs. This government agency charges $100 per shipment. But take a look at what one private company is demanding. Opening Lines put out this price list: $325 for a spinal cord, $550 for a reproductive organ, $999 for a brain. Alberti says he helped put together the price list. Is there any way to justify these prices?
No, there is not.
So what does this price represent?
That represents greed.
Who runs Opening Lines? Dr. Miles Jones, the Missouri pathologist whose company handled Cindy's fetuses. Last year, Jones not only mailed out the price list, but also this brochure. Fresh fetal tissue harvested and shipped to your specifications where and when you need it.
That's correct.
Pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We wanted to find out for ourselves how these companies do business. So, posing as a prospective investor, a 2020 producer met with Dr. Jones, who wanted to talk over dinner.
What does a brain go for? What does kidney or liver go for?
It's market force. It's what can you sell it for.
Over lobster bisque and roast duck, Dr. Jones explained the business of selling human fetuses.
We had projections of $50,000 a week. And, you know, in some weeks you can hit that, in some weeks you can't. It's just a matter of being able to match supply and demand.
Dr. Jones said the average specimen costs him just $50 plus overhead, but that he charges an average of $250. The law only talks about recovering costs, but on a single fetus, Jones said he can make $2,500.
That one fetus, the cost of procuring it is the same, whether you get one kidney or you get two kidneys, a lung, a brain, a heart. It's the same cost that you put into it.
But you keep charging.
Each researcher gets charged.
And each time, that's just money in the bank.
It's flat out buying and selling. It's flat out profiteering. It's flat out saying, I'm going to charge whatever you're going to pay me.
You can't kill the golden goose, but you can certainly keep it well fed, and it will lay lots of eggs for you.
A human fetus as a golden goose. I know you've been studying this business a long time, but does that shock even you?
That kind of blatant, I'm going to get the maximum value out of mining a fetus it's shocking.
Just from a human standpoint, that's horrific.
When we told Cindy Smith about Dr. Jones, she also was upset.
I did not donate that thinking ever that someone was going to profit. And that just really bothers me because that's not what I intended at all.
Alberti says some tissue companies went even further to boost their revenue. He says both companies he worked for, Opening Lines and this firm, Anatomic Gift Foundation, or AGF, pressured him to get as much tissue as possible, and at times even told him to take it from fetuses. Women had not donated for research.
Miles told me, if they're not looking, they're not looking. Why don't you grab that pancreas, even though it wasn't consented for.
And did you do it?
Yes, I did.
That's not all. Alberti alleges that abortions were altered to get better tissue. He says this clinic in Overland Park, Kansas, normally did early abortions with a suction machine. But when the fetus was being donated, he says this special syringe was used, which experts say puts women through longer, more uncomfortable abortions. Where did the clinic get the syringes? AGF was supplying these special syringes to the clinics.
That's correct.
Ross Capps also worked for AGF. He and nurses who worked at the clinic confirm that women donating fetuses were given different abortions. If the woman didn't consent, they wouldn't use the special syringe.
No. They only used the special syringe if they knew I wanted the specimen.
Again, the law says abortions can't be altered to get tissue. Alberti, who says he was originally pro-choice, was finally so disturbed by what he saw that he contacted Life Dynamics, a Texas pro-life group that paid him $10,000 to be an informant while he continued to work in the tissue business. But Alberti denies making up stories to push a political agenda. Why should people believe you? Why shouldn't we believe that there are just some things that you've said that are part of this movement?
I will stand behind my words until I die. I will go in front of Congress if I have to and testify under oath.
But Alberti's allegations are only part of the story. Some of the most troubling evidence we found came from our undercover conversation with Dr. Jones. Here, he explains how easy it is to talk a woman into donating a fetus.
You can do something that's got all the legal mumbo-jumbo in it, and they'll sign it anyway. If you have someone trained to ask properly, you can get 80–90% consent rates.
His dream, he said, is to run his own clinic in Mexico, where he could get a greater supply of fetal tissue by offering cheaper abortions.
If you control the flow, it's probably the equivalent of the invention of the assembly line.
We showed Dr. Jones's comments to Congressman Thomas Bliley, chairman of the House Commerce Committee.
Terrible. Just absolutely terrible.
After hearing allegations of illegal activity, Bliley's committee is now investigating 4 companies, and he says has found evidence the tissue is being sold for profit.
We are interested that the people who do this recover their legitimate costs. it appears that it's more than that it comes down to trafficking in tissue parts, in body parts.
Bliley is pro-life, but even the most ardent pro-choice advocates, like Planned Parenthood President Gloria Felt, are disturbed by what we found.
It seems inappropriate, totally inappropriate. Where there is wrongdoing, it should be prosecuted, and people who are doing that kind of things should be brought to justice.
We wanted to talk with some of these fetal tissue businessmen. When we called Dr. Jones for an interview, he hung up on us. But James Bardsley of AGF said his nonprofit company recently got out of the business. He maintained his fees, which were lower than Jones's, were reasonable, and that AGF never asked anyone to take tissue without consent. And he suggested Alberti is angry because AGF sued him over a business dispute.
Did AGF ever encourage doctors to alter the way they did abortions to get better specimens?
No, absolutely not. First of all, that would be illegal.
But wasn't AGF supplying those special syringes to get better tissue?
Yeah, that's the logical conclusion that you would draw. I don't believe that was altering the abortion technique.
Doesn't this special syringe add as much as 15 minutes to the length of the abortion?
I don't know.
Oh, sure you do.
In some cases, perhaps, it takes longer.
Bardsley later sent us this letter saying the Kansas clinic already used syringes and that AGF provided special ones just to keep tissue sterile. The clinic finally severed its ties with AGF and later opening lines.
Oh, yeah.
But that came too late for Cindy Smith. All she thinks about is what happened to her twins.
It's just wrong for someone to be making money off the debt. I didn't want somebody to profit off of my heartache. It makes me almost feel like the one good thing I did really wasn't that good after all.
Tomorrow, a congressional subcommittee will hold a hearing on fetal tissue trafficking. And Dean Alberti, the whistleblower from inside the business, will be the star witness. As for Dr. Miles Jones, he's been subpoenaed to testify but has not responded. Investigators say if he fails to show up, Jones could be held in contempt of Congress. Charlie?
Chris, if there are laws on the books on this subject, why is it still going on? Why hasn't something been done?
It's a question we kept asking in this investigation. We couldn't find anyone in the federal government enforcing those laws, which is why tomorrow's hearing is such an important first step.
All right, Chris Wallace, thank you very much. We'll be back.